Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It started with something small. Something so ordinary that, at first, I didn't even notice it. My husband, Daniel, had always been good at keeping things simple. He wasn't the type to stir drama or make me suspicious. For 30 years, we'd shared a quiet rhythm: morning coffee, garden walks, late-night TV shows where we'd both fall asleep halfway through. Nothing spectacular, just life. And I was comfortable in it, but one evening, I noticed he started closing his laptop faster than usual. That tiny click of the lid became a sound I couldn't unhear. It wasn't that I thought he was doing something wrong, not at first. It was more the way he'd look away afterward, as if he was hiding a small storm behind those calm eyes. That I remember it clearly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, peeling apples for a pie, and Daniel was across from me, typing something with that deep furrow in his brow he always had when concentrating. When I looked up, he smiled, almost too quickly, and shut the laptop. I asked what he was working on, trying to keep it light, but his answer came with hesitation. "Just some paperwork," he said. "You know, the usual." I nodded, but something inside me whispered, "No, it's not the usual." The kitchen felt too quiet after that. Even the ticking clock above the pantry seemed louder, echoing between us for days. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that after so many years together, I might just be overanalyzing. But the little changes kept adding up. He started taking longer walks after dinner, alone. He'd leave early for errands he never used to care about. Once, I found a new notebook in his desk drawer, the kind he'd never used before. It was leather-bound, elegant, and empty except for the first page. The words were short, handwritten in his familiar print. "If she ever finds out, I'll have to tell her everything." I froze. My hands went cold, and I stood there staring at the ink as if it might rearrange itself into something less alarming. My first thought was the worst, that he'd fallen for someone else. But deep down, something didn't fit that story. Daniel wasn't distant. In fact, lately, he seemed heavier. Quieter, yes, but also kinder in small ways, like he was trying to make up for something. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a question I couldn't answer. Around midnight, I got up and went to the kitchen. The moonlight fell across the floor, silver and soft, and for a moment, I felt like I was standing in someone else's life. When I heard his footsteps behind me, I turned and saw him, half awake, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "I couldn't sleep," I said. "Thinking too much." He smiled weakly. "About what?" I hesitated. The truth sat on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed it back. "Just us," I said. He came closer and wrapped his arms around me, the warmth of his body pressing against mine. It felt familiar, comforting, but also heavy, like there was something in that hug he wasn't saying. The next morning, I decided I'd stop wondering and start finding out. I waited until he left for work, then went to his study. Everything looked the same: organized, neat, predictable. Except the laptop wasn't there. That was new. He'd never taken it to work before. It was strange how quickly curiosity can turn into something else, a mix of fear, guilt, and determination. I wasn't looking for betrayal, I was looking for truth. And that truth, I felt, had already started to knock at my door. Later that afternoon, he came home earlier than usual. His face looked pale, like he'd been carrying bad news all day. I tried to act normal, but he wasn't fooled. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same place where the silence had first begun. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. My heart pounded, but I nodded. He looked down for a long moment, then said, "There's something I should have told you months ago. I didn't because I didn't want to worry you." The words felt heavy, like each one had been dragged out of him. I held my breath, waiting. "I've been seeing a doctor," he said finally. "They found something, small, but they're not sure yet what it means." For a second, the room tilted. All those nights of suspicion, all the questions, they twisted into guilt and panic. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "I thought I could protect you," he said. "I wanted to have answers first. I didn't want you to be scared." I felt the sting of tears I hadn't expected. All that time, I thought he was pulling away, when really, He was carrying something too heavy for one person that I reached for his hand, and he let me hold it. It was cold, trembling slightly. You should have told me, I said again, but softer this time. We've faced everything together. Why would this be any different? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the man I'd married 30 years ago, afraid not for himself but for me. I was afraid of losing the life we have, he said. The peace. The normal days. I didn't want to turn them into hospital visits and test results. I squeezed his hand tighter. You don't lose peace by telling the truth, I said quietly. You lose it by hiding it. He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that comes when the walls finally start to fall. That night, we sat together for hours, not talking much, just sitting in the quiet that felt different now, honest, not empty that I didn't know what the next days would bring, or what those test results would say. But I knew one thing for certain, whatever he was hiding wasn't meant to deceive me. It was meant to protect me, and somehow, that made the truth both heavier and lighter all at once. As I looked at him that night, half asleep in his chair, I realized something else. Sometimes love isn't about sharing everything at once. Sometimes, it's about understanding why someone needed to hold something back, until they were ready to let you in, and that's when I knew this was just the beginning of what I was about to find out. The morning after Daniel told me about the doctor's visits, the house felt different. It wasn't just quieter, it was heavier, as if every wall had absorbed the truth overnight. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen, the same as always, yet it felt like I was walking into a new life I hadn't agreed to. He was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper, but his eyes weren't moving. He was just staring at the same page, pretending to read. When I came in, he looked up and tried to smile, but it was one of those smiles that start strong and fade halfway. Morning, he said softly. Morning, I replied, pouring my coffee. I tried to keep my hands from shaking, but the cup still rattled against the saucer. Did you sleep? A little, he said. You? I shrugged. Some. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was something deeper. The kind of silence that fills a room when two people are both thinking the same thing, but neither wants to say it first. After a while, I said, what did the doctor say exactly? He folded the paper, set it aside, and exhaled. They found a growth near my lung. They think it might be benign, but they're running more tests. I didn't want to tell you until I knew for sure. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. And now? He looked out the window, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his cup. Now I'm scared, Mary. It was the first time I'd ever heard him say those words. Daniel had always been the calm one, the fixer, the man who could build a table from scraps or calm a storm with a steady word. Hearing him say he was scared broke something inside me, not because I saw him as weak, but because I finally realized he was human too. I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. You don't have to go through this alone, I said. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. I didn't want you to look at me differently. I don't, I said. But you have to let me in, Daniel. You've always carried the weight for both of us, let me carry some now. That afternoon, we went to his appointment together. The waiting room was sterile and cold, filled with people who wore the same expression, quiet fear masked by polite smiles. I sat beside him, my fingers intertwined with his, and tried to focus on the little things, the hum of the vending machine, the flicker of the fluorescent light above us, the sound of his breathing when his name was called. He squeezed my hand once before standing. You don't have to come in, he said. I'm not letting you go alone, I replied. Inside the doctor's office, everything smelled faintly of disinfectant. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, greeted us gently. She spoke in that careful tone doctors use when they're trying to sound calm but don't want to give false hope. Mr. Ellis, she said, we've reviewed your scans. There's a small mass on the left lung, as we mentioned before. We're scheduling a biopsy next week to determine what exactly we're dealing with. I felt my stomach twist. A mass. The word echoed in my head, heavy and foreign. Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw set. And if it's not benign? The doctor hesitated. Then we'll make a plan. But right now, we focus on finding out what it is. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. The radio played softly, some old country song about time and loss, and I kept my eyes on the road, afraid that if I looked at him, I'd cry. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Daniel reached over and turned off the ignition but didn't move. I didn't want to tell you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Because once I said it out loud, it would become real. I turned to him and said, "It was already real, Daniel. You just gave it a name." He looked at me, eyes glistening, and for a long time, neither of us moved. Then he reached for my hand, holding it tightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Don't be," I said. "We're going to face this together." That night, I lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. Every inhale felt like a promise, one I was determined to protect. The days that followed were filled with small moments that now felt precious. We spent more time in the garden, drinking tea on the porch as the sun went down. We laughed more, even though sometimes it came through tears. He started writing again in that leather notebook, not hiding it anymore. One afternoon, I asked if I could read it. He hesitated, then handed it to me. Inside were pages filled with reflections about our life, our kids, the small things he was grateful for. On one page, I read something that made me pause. "If I don't make it," he'd written, "I hope she knows that the best years of my life were the ones where we were just ordinary, drinking coffee, arguing about nothing, falling asleep on the couch." I felt tears rolling down before I could stop them. When I looked up, he was watching me, silent but with that same soft smile. "I meant it," he said. I closed the notebook gently. "Then you'll have to stay long enough to add more pages," I said. He chuckled quietly, reaching for my hand. "That's the plan." And for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope, because even though we didn't know what the future held, we knew we were in it together. And somehow, that made the unknown a little less terrifying. But little did I know, there was still something he hadn't told me. Something that would change how I saw everything, not out of deceit, but out of love. The biopsy week felt like a blur: too much waiting, too many phone calls, and not enough answers. I tried to keep the house filled with normal sounds: the clinking of dishes, the soft hum of the washing machine, the radio playing quietly in the background, anything to drown out the sound of my thoughts. Daniel was calm, at least on the outside. He still smiled, still asked about my day, still insisted on doing small chores around the house. But every now and then, I'd catch him staring out the window, lost in a world I couldn't reach. The morning of his appointment, he dressed in his favorite blue shirt, the one I'd bought him years ago for our anniversary. As I straightened his collar, I realized his hair had more gray in it than I remembered. Maybe it had always been there, and I just hadn't noticed. "You ready?" I asked. He smiled. "As I'll ever be." We drove in silence most of the way. It wasn't the heavy silence of fear anymore, but one of quiet understanding. We'd said everything that needed to be said, at least, I thought we had. After the procedure, the doctor told us it would take a few days for the results. "Try to relax," she said. "Go home, rest, do something you enjoy." So that's what we did. We went home and spent the day doing what we used to, tending to the garden, sipping lemonade on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, when Daniel told one of his old corny jokes. For a few hours, we were just us again: no fear, no waiting, no hospital smell clinging to our clothes. But that peace didn't last long. That evening, as I was folding laundry, I noticed something in the drawer: a small envelope with my name on it, written in Daniel's handwriting. My first instinct was to open it, but something stopped me. The handwriting looked recent, and the way it was tucked beneath his sweaters made me think it wasn't meant for now. When Daniel came into the room, I slipped the envelope back quietly. He didn't see. He just smiled and said, "Want to take a walk before it gets dark?" We walked down the gravel road that led behind our house, the one lined with wildflowers and old wooden fences. The air smelled like rain was coming, and I could hear the soft rustle of the trees above us. He held my hand the whole time. At one point, he stopped, looked around, and said, "You know, if something ever happens to me, I want you to promise me something." I felt a chill even though the evening was warm. "Don't talk like that," I said. He squeezed my hand gently. "Just promise me you'll keep living. Go places. See the ocean again. Laugh, even when it feels impossible." I stared at him for a moment, my throat too tight to speak. "You're not going anywhere," I finally whispered. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I hope not." That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at that envelope in my hands. The more I looked at it, the heavier it felt. I knew it wasn't meant to hurt me, Daniel wasn't like that, but curiosity burned in my chest. Eventually, I opened it. Inside was a letter. The first line made my breath catch. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to tell you everything in person, and my hands shook as I read on. There's something I've kept from you, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how. A few years ago, before all this, I found out that I have a son. Before you and I met, when I was much younger, I made mistakes, and one of them came back into my life. His name is Aaron. He reached out to me a year ago. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure how you'd feel, and I didn't want to bring more pain into our life. But he's a good man, Mary. He reminded me of the kind of person I once was, before I learned how to be better. With you. I stopped reading. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the walls closing in. A son. A grown man out there with his eyes, his hands, his voice maybe. I felt shock more than anger. I kept reading. He doesn't want anything from me, or from us. He just wanted to know who his father was. I was planning to tell you, after the biopsy, when I knew where things stood. I didn't want to leave this world with more secrets. Please, if I don't get the chance to introduce you, meet him one day. You'd like him. He has your calmness, your warmth, though he's never met you. Funny how that happens, isn't it? I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. I didn't know what to feel: hurt, sadness, curiosity, maybe all of it at once. He had been hiding something after all, just not the kind of secret I expected. When Daniel came into the living room, I didn't say anything. He looked tired, his eyes soft and full of trust. Everything okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said, setting the letter aside. Everything's fine. And in that moment, I realized something. This secret wasn't about betrayal. It was about a man trying to make peace with his past while still protecting the life he loved. Later that night, as he slept beside me, I watched him breathe, that steady rhythm that had once been so ordinary but now felt like the heartbeat of our home. There was still so much I didn't know about him, about this Aaron, about what tomorrow might bring. But one thing was certain: I wasn't finished finding out who my husband really was, and somehow, I wasn't afraid of that anymore. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Daniel was still asleep beside me, breathing deeply, unaware that I'd spent half the night awake with that letter resting on the nightstand. I watched him for a while, memorizing the way his face looked in the light: peaceful, familiar, and yet, suddenly more complex than I had ever realized. That I wanted to be angry. I really did. But as I lay there, I couldn't find that anger. What I felt instead was understanding. Life is full of untold stories, things we bury not because they're shameful, but because we want to protect the people we love from the weight of them. Still, I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. When he woke up, I made breakfast: eggs, toast, and the strawberry jam he liked. We ate quietly. Finally, I said, Daniel, there's something we need to talk about. He looked up from his plate, eyes soft but wary. What's wrong? I reached for his hand across the table. I found the letter. His fork froze midair. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then he set it down carefully. I see, he said. I wasn't looking for it, I said quickly. But I found it, and I read it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I wanted to tell you, he said. I just didn't know how. Or when. I believe you, I said softly. But I need to understand. Why now? Why after all these years? He exhaled slowly. Because he found me. Aaron reached out last year. He'd spent years searching. He didn't ask for anything, just to talk. I met him a few times for coffee. He told me about his life, about his mother, and I didn't tell you because I thought it would open wounds we didn't need. Then, when I got sick, it felt wrong to keep it from you any longer. So, I wrote the letter, just in case. I sat there for a long moment, trying to picture it: Daniel meeting this man who shared his blood but not his history. Does he know about me? I asked. He nodded. He does. He wanted to meet you, actually. I told him I needed time. The truth settled over me slowly, heavy but clear. Then maybe, I said quietly, it's time. He looked at me, surprised. You'd want to meet him? Yes, I said. If he's a part of your story, then he's a part of mine too. A week later, Aaron came to visit. I remember standing by the window, watching as a car pulled up the driveway. When he stepped out, I saw traces of Daniel immediately, the same steady eyes, the same way of holding his shoulders like he carried the world carefully, afraid to drop it. Daniel introduced us on the porch. "Mary," he said softly, "this is Aaron." Aaron extended his hand. "It's nice to finally meet you," he said. His voice was calm, gentle. I shook his hand, feeling a strange mix of familiarity and curiosity. "It's nice to meet you too," I replied. We sat outside for hours that afternoon, the three of us. Aaron told stories about his mother, about growing up, about the years he spent wondering who his father was. Daniel listened quietly, his hand resting on mine the whole time. At one point, Aaron turned to me and said, "I don't want to disrupt your lives. I just wanted to know him before it was too late." His honesty disarmed me. "You're not disrupting anything," I said. "You're adding something that was missing." The look on Daniel's face when I said that, I'll never forget it. Gratitude, relief, and love all mixed together. It was the kind of look that said everything words couldn't. Over the next few weeks, Aaron visited often. He helped Daniel in the garden, fixed the old fence out back, and even joined us for Sunday dinners. Slowly, what began as shock started to feel natural, as if he had always been there, just waiting for the right time to step into our lives. Then came the day of Daniel's final test results. We sat in the doctor's office again, just like before. The doctor smiled this time, a small, cautious smile. "The biopsy came back benign," she said. "No signs of cancer. You'll still need checkups, but you're in the clear." I felt tears streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. Daniel laughed, a deep, joyful laugh I hadn't heard in months, and squeezed my hand. When we got home, Aaron hugged his father tightly, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching the two of them. It felt like everything had come full circle, the secrets, the fear, the waiting, all leading to this single, beautiful truth. Life always finds a way to mend what we think is broken. That evening, Daniel and I sat on the porch again, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The sky turned shades of gold and pink, and the air was warm, peaceful. "You forgive me?" he asked quietly. I smiled. "There's nothing to forgive. You were just trying to protect me, and in a way, you did." He nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "You've always been stronger than me," he said. "Maybe," I whispered. "But I'm only strong because you gave me something to hold on to." He reached for my hand and said, "You found out what I tried to hide. And somehow, it brought us closer." I looked at him then, really looked, and realized he was right. The secret that once threatened to divide us had, instead, deepened what we had built over a lifetime. As the crickets began their evening song and the first stars appeared, I thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the truth, the unexpected bond that had entered our lives. Sometimes love isn't about keeping things perfect. It's about finding your way back to each other, even after the truth changes everything. And as I sat there beside Daniel, his hand warm in mine, I realized what he tried to hide wasn't the end of our story. It was just another chapter in a love that had survived everything.